then we're going to move into how many people do you need for a minion. So hopefully we'll get there. And if all works out well, I also have some treats in store for us today. I was playing around with AI yesterday, and we'll see what happens. We will begin with the bracha that we say before learning Torah, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. Let's go back to where we were up to. Okay. The waiter, did we speak about the waiter already? Okay. Last week we finished off. I'm sorry I did not end up having time to research Maimonides, but last week we ended up with speaking about the fifth, and that a fifth is really a quarter. And when the Torah uses the word fifth, it refers to a fifth of the total once you've added the extra quarter.
Wow.
Okay, we learned in the Mishnah, the waiter who ate at least an olive bulk from the meal may join in the zimun. The Gemara remarks, this is obvious. Why was it necessary for the Mishnah to teach us this halacha that if the waiter, why would the waiter be different than anyone else? And the Gemara answers, lest you say that the waiter who stands and serves the diners did not establish himself as a participant of the meal. And therefore, because he is not a established participant of the meal, he wasn't sitting down to eat, he was waiting on them. And therefore, even though he ate, he's not going to be considered part of the meal. Therefore, the Mishnah teaches us that even the waiter is considered to have established himself as a participant of the meal, and therefore he can join them in the zimun if he ate at least an olive bulk. Okay. The Mishnah states that the Kutim, the Samaritans, may be included in the zimun. Now, the Jewish people's relationship with the Kutim, as we mentioned last week, was sketchy. It was not a very happy relationship over there. There's many of them converted. The reason why they converted and became Jewish is because there was a plague of lions that were harassing all the non-Jews in the land. And therefore, these people were afraid for their lives, so they converted to Judaism. And so there was a question as to whether we accept these people as converts or not. They didn't convert because they wanted to be Jews. They converted out of fear for their lives. And therefore, the concern is that they would not be proper and devout converts. At any point, at any rate, they were living amongst the Jews and they kept some of the Torah. And so there were some of the sages who considered them as completely not Jewish at all. Others who said, well, they converted, so we have to accept them as Jews. Some of them were indeed devout Jews. Some of them were not interested in the Jewish way. So they, as a nation, were very problematic in terms of they were, as we say in Yiddish, nishta hinu nishta her, neither here nor there. And some of them caused great amounts of trouble for the Jewish people. So,
If they were insincere, why were they accepted as converts in the first place?
that is a good question. If they were insincere, why were they accepted in the first place? I don't remember all the history precisely. They definitely went through a kosher conversion process. I don't remember. That's a good question. I wonder if the Encyclopedia Judaica has a section on the Samaritans. I'd be curious to hear what it says there. Okay. So the Mishnah said that a kuti may be included in the zimun. Oh, Zaman, you going to check it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll wait a minute and see if you come up
Oh,
with
go
something.
ahead. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. So the Gemara asks, why would a Samaritan be allowed to join the zimun? Why would a kuti be allowed to join the zimun? The Gemara asks, why? Even if you consider him a member of the Jewish people, let him be considered an Am Haaretz. An Am Haaretz is a term used to describe Jewish people who are not scrupulous in matters of ritual purity and people who are not careful about tithes. And it was taught in a brisa that an Am Haaretz may not be included in the zimun. So, why are we allowing this Samaritan, this kuti, to join our zimun if even a full Jew who was born to Jewish mother, yet he is not scrupulous in matters of ritual purity and tithes, he would not be allowed to join in the zimun. So why is the kuti better than the Jew? Better than the Am Haaretz Jew? The Gemara offers several answers. Abaya said, the Mishnah is referring to a kuti who is a chaver. A chaver is someone who is scrupulous about these matters. So if we have a kuti who we know to be a devout Jew, then he is accepted as a Jew and he can join in our zimun. Rava says, even if you say that the Mishnah does refer to a kuti who is an Am Haaretz, and there is a distinction as to what is considered the terminology of Am Haaretz. Even if you say that the Mishnah refers to a kuti who is an Am Haaretz, and here the prohibition to include an Am Haaretz in a zimun refers to the Am Haaretz as defined by the rabbis, who disagree with Rabbi Meir. Let's look at this following brisa as it was taught in a brisa. Who is considered an Am Haaretz? Anyone who does not eat non-sacred food in a state of ritual purity. This is a statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said anyone, so some background here. In the temple times, it very much mattered whether you were pure or impure. Today, we barely even recognize the laws of purity and impurity. In the times of the Talmud, it was very different. In the times of the Mishnah and in the times of the temple, purity and impurity was a real part of their lives. As someone who was pure could enter the Temple Mount, and someone who was impure could not. So everyone, or there were great communities of people who would ensure that, or who would work hard to make sure that they were constantly in a state of purity. And they would make sure that even if there was regular food that they were eating, regular, I don't know, steak and potatoes on a Monday night, and they were and they were eating this food that was not necessarily holy food, they would eat it in a state of purity as well, which is something that is not necessary, but something that many people did in those days to make sure that they were always on top of their game and they would not fall into making a mistake and eating holy foods in a state of impurity.
Yes, Rabbi, there is a very extensive section on the Samaritans.
Okay.
But I don't, but just glancing at it briefly, I don't see anything about the conversion of what you were talking about, but I have to go look through it a lot more closely because, yeah, I mean, it goes on for like 30 pages or
Oh,
20
wow.
pages, 20 pages. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Zaman. Okay. So Rabbi Meir says anyone who is not at that high level of making sure that they are constantly in a state of purity is considered an Am Haaretz. And according to that, when the Brisa said that an Am Haaretz is not allowed to join in a Zimun, of course it wasn't talking about this kind of Am Haaretz. The rabbis say an Am Haaretz is anyone who does not appropriately tithe his produce. Someone who does not take the tithes that they're supposed to. And these kutim, they do tithe their produce appropriately, as they are scrupulous with regard to that which is written in the Torah. As the master said, meaning as we've learned from a teacher, a great teacher in the Talmud, any mitzvah that the kutim embraced and accepted upon themselves, they're even more exacting in its observance than Jews. So because we know that tithes is one of the areas that the kutim embraced, in regards to tithes, they are more scrupulous than the regular everyday Jew. Therefore, we could see that this guy, even though he's a Samaritan, he would not be considered an Am Haaretz because we know that he tithes his produce. Now that we're already talking about an Am Haaretz, let's talk about the defining characteristics of an Am Haaretz. Am Haaretz is a derogatory term, at least in today's vernacular. In those days, it literally means a nation of the earth. Usually would be representing a boorish person, someone of a lower standard and caliber. The Gemara cites a brisa with additional opinions with regard to the defining characteristics of an Am Haaretz. The sages taught who is an Am Haaretz? One who does not recite Shema in the evening and the morning. This is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua says an Am Haaretz is one who does not don phylacteries. Ben Azai says an Am Haaretz is one who does not have ritual fringes on his garment. Rabbi Natan says an Am Haaretz is one who does not have a mezuzah on his doorway. Rabbi Natan Bar Yosef says an Am Haaretz is one who has children but does not want them to study Torah, so he does not raise them to engage in Torah study. Acherim, which is a reference to Rabbi Meir, says even if one read the Bible and studied the Mishnah and did not serve Torah scholars to learn from them the meaning of the Torah that he studied, in other words, he didn't apprentice in Jewish law, that is an Am Haaretz. And Rav Huna said the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Acherim, which is the most stringent view, that even if a person learned the Torah, the Bible, and he studied all of the Mishnah, yet he did not learn the Talmud, and he did not study by a teacher who could explain to him the methodology of learning and the correct way of understanding, he would be considered an Am Haaretz. And if you remember just a few minutes ago, we said that an Am Haaretz cannot be included in a Zimun. So on that note, connecting those two stories, the Gemara relates a story. Rami Bar Chama did not include Rav Menashia Bar Tachlifa, who studied the Sifrei Halachos, and he did not include him in a Zimun because he had merely studied and did never apprenticed by serving the Torah scholars. When Rami Bar Chama passed away, Rava said that the reason he died is because, meaning the only sin that he had in his life is the fact that he did not include Rabbi Menashe Bar Tachlifa in a Zimun. The Gemara asks, was it not taught in a Brisa? Acherim say that even if one read the Bible and studied the Mishnah and did not serve Torah scholars, that is an Am Haaretz. Why then was Rami Bar Chama punished? He was going according with the Mishnah that says that an Am Haaretz, Brisa, that says an Am Haaretz cannot be included in the Zimun, as well as with the opinion who would call a person like Menashe Bar Tachlifa an Am Haaretz. So what did he do wrong? The Gemara answers, Rav Menashe Bar Tachlifa is different because he did serve the sages. And it was Rami Bar Chama who was not precise in his efforts to check after him to ascertain his actions. Another version of the Gemara's answer is that anyone who hears halachas from the mouths of the sages and studies them is considered a Torah scholar, even if he did not necessarily serve them, but if he learnt by them, that's enough. Okay. That was explaining all the different portions of the Mishnah that we're talking about, different foods or different scenarios that a person could eat or be part of a meal in which they would be allowed to join the Zimun. Now we're going to go into the next part of the Mishnah, which describes the people who cannot be part of the Zimun. The Mishnah states that one who ate untithed produce or the first tithes, etc., is not included in the Zimun. The Gemara remarks, it is obvious, as one is forbidden to eat untithed produce, and therefore, of course, he should not join in the Zimun because he ate foods which are forbidden. The Gemara responds, it was only necessary to teach this halacha with regard to a case where it is only considered untithed produce by rabbinic law. Although I hate that they do this Torah law, they should write biblical law. Although by biblical law, it was permitted. What are the circumstances? The circumstances are where the produce grew in an unperforated flower pot, as anything grown disconnected from the ground is not considered produce of the ground and is exempt by biblical law from tithing. However, by rabbinic law, it is considered untithed. So, there is a great distinction when it comes to flower pots. If you grow something in a flower pot, is it considered growing on the ground or is it considered not growing in the ground? What do you think? Is your flower pot a field?
Could be considered an extension of the field.
Chaim says it would be considered an extension of the field. Zaman, I'm not sure if you're saying something. You're muted.
Well, it's, I mean, it is growing in dirt and earth, but I guess it depends on your point of view, really. I mean, it's not something that has a definite answer.
Right. So we're going to learn about it later on, but what the Talmud's definition, or the Mishnah's definition, I should say, of whether it's considered part of the field or not depends on the circumstances. So if you have a flower pot that's sitting on your kitchen table, then of course that's considered not your field. The question is if your flower pot is outside in your garden. If your flower pot is outside in your garden and it has holes that are big enough that a root could go through the flower pot and into the ground, then it's considered connected with the ground. However, if you have a flower pot with a solid bottom and the roots of whatever you're growing in the flower pot cannot, it could have even a big flower pot, cannot reach the ground, then it is considered not inside the ground. So by biblical law, it would be exempt from tithes. However, by rabbinic law, it would be required in tithes. So if we have this kind of produce, which is only, what's the word? It's considered untithed only by rabbinic law because the necessity to tithe them is only from the rabbinic law. You might think that you're allowed to join in a zimun. So the Gemara comes to tell us, the Mishnah comes to tell us that such a person cannot join the zimun.
Well, what if it's by Torah law? Then why would rabbinic law disagree with Torah law?
So that's why I don't like the words Torah law here. It should be biblical law. By biblical law, it would be considered, by biblical law, it would be considered produce that does not need to be tithed. However, by rabbinic law, this produce would need to be tithed. We learned in the Mishnah that one who ate the first tithe, so I guess this is talking about a Levite who has his first tithe, from which Teruma was not separated, he didn't give his part to the Kohen, may not be included in the Zimun. Because the Levite must take 10% of what he got and give it to the Kohen, and the Levite in his tithe, before he gives the portion to the Kohen, is considered just as a regular Israelite before they give their tithe to the Levite. The Gemara remarks also over here, it is obvious, it's forbidden to eat such food, and therefore, of course, he would not be allowed to join in the Zimun. The Gemara responds that it was only necessary for the Mishnah to teach this. We discussed this at length, I believe, 2 weeks ago, in regard to a case where the Levite preceded the priest after the kernels of grain were placed in a pile. Sorry. We did not discuss this. What we discussed was if the Levite preceded the priest before the grain came into a pile. If the grain was still in stalks and the Levite preceded him, then the Levite is allowed to eat the food. However, if the Levite preceded the priest once the kernels had already been placed in a pile, therefore, in this scenario, the Levite has to give not only his 10%, but also whatever percentage the 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 40 or 1 out of 60 that the Israelite would have given, the Levite has to give that on top of whatever he usually would need to give to the Kohen. Lest you say, as Rav Papa said to Abaye, that in that case too, the produce should be exempt from the obligation to separate Teruma Gedola. The Tana of our Mishnah teaches us, as Abaye responded to Rav Papa, that there is a difference between the case when the grain was on the stalks and when the grain was in the pile. If the grain was on the stalks, the Levite does not have to add anything to the regular portion that he would have to give to the Kohen. However, once it's already in a pile, he has to give whatever he needs to give, the 10% that he needs to give, as well as the 1/40th, 1/50th, or 1/60th that the Israelite would have given. We also learned in our Mishnah that if one ate the second tithe, or which the second tithe is in the years that he would take this food and bring it up to Jerusalem, or if he was eating consecrated food that had been consecrated for the temple, and both of these foods has not yet been redeemed, he may not be included in a zimun. And the Gemara asks, it is obvious. Of course, it's forbidden to eat food which is consecrated, and it is forbidden to eat second tithes that have not been redeemed outside of Jerusalem. So, of course, if he's eating forbidden foods, he's not allowed to join in the zimun. Why was it necessary for the Mishnah to teach this law? The Gemara responds, it was only necessary for the Mishnah to teach this halacha with regard to a case where they were redeemed, but they were not redeemed properly. For example, second tithe that was redeemed with an unminted coin, a silver bullion that had not yet been engraved. And the Torah says that you have to bind up the money in your hand. The word bind up is vetzarta. The word vetzarta has the same etymology as the word tziyur, which is to inscribe or engrave or to form a image, which the sages interpreted as follows. Vetzarta refers to money that has a form, a tzura, engraved upon it. So if a person redeemed this food on a just plain silver bullion, you might think that he has redeemed it for silver, and therefore he's allowed to eat the food. Comes along our Mishnah to say, no, you need to redeem it on actual money. Consecrated property, in a case where he redeemed it by exchanging it for land instead of money, and the Torah states he will give him the money and it will be assured to him. So either he redeemed it with an unminted coin or with land, in which scenarios this would not allow him to go ahead and eat the food. The Mishnah states that a waiter who ate less than an olive bulk may not join a zimun. The Gemara remarks, this is obvious. Anyone who ate less than an olive bulk may not join the zimun. Why was it necessary for the Mishnah to teach this law? The Gemara answers, since the first clause of the Mishnah taught the halacha with regard to a waiter who did eat an olive bulk. Therefore, the latter clause taught the halacha with regard to a waiter who ate less than an olive bulk. Although it is indeed obvious, in the interest of arriving at a similar formulation in the two parts of the Mishnah, it was included. So the Mishnah, the first part of the Mishnah and the second part of the Mishnah mirror each other. Therefore, the Mishnah brought the case of the waiter, even though that case is indeed obvious. The Mishnah further states that a non-Jew, a Gentile, is not included in a zimun. The Gemara remarks, it is obvious. Why was it necessary for the Mishnah to teach this halacha? So the Gemara answers that we're not talking about someone who is completely a non-Jew. What are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a case of a convert who is in the middle of the conversion process. He has already been circumcised, but of course he cannot go to the mikvah as soon as he has been circumcised. He has to wait for the wound to heal. So he was already circumcised, but did not yet immerse himself in the mikvah. As Rabbi Zera said, that Rabbi Yochanan said, one is never considered a convert until he is circumcised and immerses himself. And as long as he did not immerse himself, he is still considered a Gentile. So even though he learned everything that he needs to learn before the conversion process, and he has already gone through most of the conversion process, he has accepted upon himself the sovereignty of God. He has accepted upon himself to fulfill all of the mitzvahs. He understands what it means to be a Jew. He has already gotten his circumcision, and the only thing that is left is for him to go into the mikvah. He still may not join the zimun until he has gone into the mikvah. We also learned in the Mishnah that women, slaves, minors are not included in the zimun. Rabbi Yossi said a minor lying in a cradle is included in a zimun. The Gemara objects. Didn't we learn in the Mishnah that women, slaves, and minors are not included in a zimun? How could a little baby who's sleeping in a bassinet be included? The Gemara responds, and here we're going to segue into the laws of a minyan. Rabbi Yossi stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. As Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, although a minor lying in a cradle is not included in a zimun of 3, one can make him an adjunct to complete an assembly of 10 people, enabling them to invoke God's name in a zimun. So, even though he cannot be the 3rd person in a zimun, he could be the 10th person in a zimun. Any questions?
So if it's just a minor lying in the cradle, what about a minor who's 10 years old?
Very good question. And from here, it would seem that a minor who's 10 years old would also be able to be the 10th man for the zimun.
Minors, 10-year-olds don't lay in cradles.
Correct. So if even a minor laying in a cradle could be, then for sure, once they're older. So now, here we have an interesting story, and if my technology is working, we will see a cute little skit on this. On the subject of completing a zimun, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, 9 Jews and a slave can join together to form a zimun of 10. So the way it works is a non-Jewish slave, or Jewish slave is Jewish, but a non-Jewish slave is not completely non-Jewish. A non-Jewish slave has certain mitzvahs that they are commanded to complete. Therefore, in certain circumstances, they could be used. For example, if you have 9 Jews and a slave, the slave could be your 10th man for a minyan because he is included in certain of the mitzvahs. The Gemara raises an objection. We know that there was an incident involving Rabbi Eliezer, who entered a synagogue and did not find a minyan. So he liberated his slave and completed the minyan. So what do we infer from here before reading further? What does the story teach us?
Are you talking, Rabbi?
No, I'm asking a question. So the Gemara said that if we have 9 Jews and a slave, could join with a minion. The slave can be the 10th man for the minion. The Gemara raises an objection. There was an incident involving Rabbi Eliezer, who entered a synagogue and did not find the minion there. So he liberated his slave and completed the minion. So the question I was asking is, before reading further,
Well, that's a contradiction.
What's the contradiction?
If a slave can be part of a minion, then Eliezer didn't need to liberate a slave.
Very good. From this, we may infer that if he freed his slave, yes, he may join the minion. But if he did not free him, he may not join the minion. So how could Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say that 9 Jews and a slave can join to be a minion? We have a very clear story that Rabbi Eliezer, who was a great rabbi, he freed his slave to be part of the minion. If a slave could be part of the minion, there was no need to free him. The Gemara responds, in that case, they were missing 2. They had 8 people. And there was another slave there besides for Rabbi Eliezer's slave. The Gemara responds, in that case, 2 were required to complete the quorum. Rabbi Eliezer freed one and fulfilled his obligation with another one who completed the quorum of 10 without being freed. Adia, go ahead.
So the slave can only be part of the minion while being a slave, right? Like once you free that slave, then he cannot be part of it.
That is a good question. The answer is that once the slave gets freed, he becomes a full Jew. So in order to become a slave, he has to go through a kind of like a quasi-conversion process, but he is not yet required to fulfill all the mitzvahs. Once he is freed, yes, he becomes a free man, but he also becomes a full Jew. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you, Robin.
Okay. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to share this and we're going to see if this will work. Where was this? Was it in my drafts or my posts? Wait, are you able to see my screen?
All it says is started screen sharing.
Right.
Started screen sharing?
Okay, that was yeah.
Now you see it. So let me go over here. Why can't I see this? Here. All right. My video failed. The draft is ready. Wait, what's going on? It's reloading here. Here we go. Why is it not playing? Okay. Huh. I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Why is it not? Oh. Rise early. 1 second. This is the wrong one. We're almost there. I'm trying to get this one. Technology is cool, but not so cool.
Trying to complete the Zimun of 10. Wasn't there a story of Rabbi Eliezer? He freed.
I'm sorry. Let's try this again. See if it'll go. There we go.
Trying to complete the Zimun of 10. Wasn't there a story of Rabbi Eliezer? He freed his slave to make the quorum. I release you this day. Come and stand with us. Blessed are you, Lord our God. 9 Jews and a slave can join to complete the.
Okay. I thought that was cute. What do you guys think?
What was it?
It was AI. I asked AI to make a story of that, a story of what we just learned. Should we watch it one more time? Or you guys saw it?
Needs some work, frankly.
It needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of work. I just typed in, I
Kind of-
copied this text, I pasted it into AI, and this is what came out.
Kind of abridged, like a
Yeah,
Reader's Digest or something.
exactly. With regard to this incident, the Gemara asks, how did he do that? Didn't Rabbi Yehuda say anyone who frees his Canaanite slave violates a positive mitzvah? As it is stated with regard to Canaanite slaves, you will keep them as an inheritance for your children after you, to hold as a possession. They will serve as bondsmen for you forever. So if the Torah tells us that you have to keep them as slaves for yourselves and your children, how then could Rabbi Eliezer have freed his slave? The Gemara answers, the case of a mitzvah is different. If you're freeing your slave in order to have a minyan, then that is allowed. You're not allowed to free them just for freeing them, but you can free them for a mitzvah. And the Gemara asks a question on that, though. If that is the case, it is a mitzvah that comes through transgression. If you steal someone's tefillin, are you able to use them as a mitzvah?
No. Yeah, I mean, you can still use it.
You can still use it, but it's a disgusting mitzvah. The Gemara asks, it is a mitzvah that comes through transgression, and a mitzvah that is fulfilled in that manner is inherently flawed. The Gemara responds, a mitzvah that benefits the many is different, and one may free a slave for that purpose because it's not just a mitzvah for you, it's a mitzvah for the entire community. In praise of a quorum of 10, in praise of the minyan, the Gemara states that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said one should always rise early to go to the synagogue in order to have the privilege and be counted among the first 10 to complete the minyan. As even if 100 people arrive after him, he receives the reward of them all. As they are all joining that initial minyan, they are added to the rest of the minyan. The Gemara is perplexed. Does it enter your mind that he receives the reward of them all? Why should he take away their reward? They came to join the minyan. Rather, amend the statement and say, he receives a reward equivalent to the reward of them all. And here we have another little clip. Let's see if this one, I want to hear your opinion on this one, see if it's better. Oops. 1 second. Let me go back to the Zoom meeting.
Shua ben Levi taught, rise early, hurry to the synagogue, be among the first 10 to complete the minyan. For even if 100 arrive after you, the reward of them all is yours as well, not taken from them to Rabbi Yehosh.
Was that one better?
You know, it's a little more animated.
Sorry?
Bit more animated.
Right?
Shua ben Levi taught, rise early, hurry to the synagogue, be among the first 10 to complete the minyan. For even if 100 arrive after you, the reward of them all is yours as well, not taken.
Okay. Okay. It's 11:13. Let's see. Okay, I think we should stop here because we're about to get into a whole new conversation. Yeah, I think we should stop here. Tomorrow we will be continuing the class of what is Chabad. It's a great class we started last week. We'll continue, God willing, tomorrow at 11 a.m. Unless Nechama's in labor. If she is, then I will try to let you guys know in advance. A few exciting events coming up. On December 21st, the last night of Hanukkah at 5 p.m., we will be having donuts and latkes at Chabad. And on December 25, we will be having a lunch and learn with Chinese food. Sign up is going to go out for both of those. Wishing you a wonderful week. Sorry?
Is there a kosher Chinese restaurant around here? Is there a kosher Chinese restaurant around here somewhere?
Not so close. I'm probably going to get it. I'm probably going to order takeout from my favorite Chinese kosher restaurant, which is Bamboo Pan. And we'll see from there. wishing you a wonderful week, a happy week, a healthy week, and we will see you all shortly.